Episode 69 picks up right where we left off, with Eren's tatakae, but Hange just immediately asks, why are you talking to yourself? Something that isn't even a first for him, nor is it a first for me, because why are you making this personal? But more importantly, there's the question of, what does fight mean? Is this one fight with 2 rounds, or are these 2 different fights? One layer is very simple. This fight has been a mantra of Eren for as long as we've seen him, with the full version of it being fight or die, win and live. Hange is just a certified overanalyzer, and considering he already did this with the Attack Titan, you just kinda want to understand what is going on this time. Last time, they just wrote it off to Eren being a weirdo, but you know how there's that little thing of him literally seeing the future and seeing like glimpses of the rumbling? Yeah, Hange doesn't want to be blindsided again and have another Liberio happen. But beyond all the character implications, this is still Attack on Titan, so there's also a whole bunch of memory shenanigans and crazy foreshadowing going on. First off, him saying this in the mirror is another reflection of what we already saw with Frida. He is fighting 2 fights at the same time. This is a fight against himself and against his enslavement to that freedom that he so desperately craved. He has seen the rumbling, he wishes to stop it, but no matter how much he fights, there's no winning. And at the same time, there is that existential fight for parity, one where Eren has already sacrificed his humanity and would pursue the most extreme of beliefs. He is fighting these 2 entirely separate fights at the same time, both pulling him and his psyche in completely opposite directions. In a similar vein, the fight with 2 rounds is also a reflection of what we see throughout this episode, and more importantly, what happened ever since he saw the future during the medal ceremony. Round 1 in his life was the life that he lived before he saw, and more importantly, confirmed the future. He dreamt of seeing the world beyond the walls alongside Mikasa and Armin. A life where all he desired was peace and freedom. A life where all of his friends get to live long lives. Keep in mind that throughout all of these flashbacks, even when Eren is being super wholesome and super friendly, he has already seen the rumbling. But even so, he repeatedly advocates against using it. It is him still hoping that that future, it's not written in ink. Round 2, however, is the path of the rumbling. Something he eventually learns has been decided, and a fight he simply can't tap out of. His friends won't be safe, countless will die at his hand, and his freedom is nothing more than self-imposed chains. The only thing he can do to keep himself together is to just keep muttering that mantra. A slightly less insane spin on this is of course the very explicit 2 enemies that he is currently fighting. He is using Zeke and Yelena, but they are not allies. But he is also using the entirety of Parody, who too are not allies in this particular plan. In terms of what he is doing, he is completely alone, and soon to be pressured from both sides as he pursues his own messed up desires. That aside, Hange also compliments his new hairstyle, which is very funny goofy, but it may or may not be another case of inherited memories. Grisha, for example, also had long hair, but he never put it in a bun or anything like that. And this is also not a hairstyle we see on Parody. Most dudes just seem to have short hair, and some of them even have ripsaw blades for hair. Someone who did have a bun though is Laura. So I think Eren switching up his hair right after he ate her is quite curious, especially considering we've already seen him copy behavioral patterns from past shifters. But my favorite part here has to be Eren finally responding, simply asking, what is Hange doing here? Hange says, just to talk, then reminiscing about how they spent the whole night talking about Titans, saying, in hindsight, it was just me rambling about my research. I think it's the perfect reflection of how Hange operates. Information and understanding of the situation is paramount. That's why we see the immediate questioning of what fight means. Hange doesn't have the super vibes that Erwin did. Hange and Armin too operate on information, something they desperately lack because Eren betrayed them. Throughout this entire episode, we see characters try to understand and come to terms with this sudden betrayal. Hange remembers how he listened for hours and hours on end, but now that hurts because was anything ever genuine? Did he ever actually care? Sure, in Season 1 that was played up for goofs because he was like, oh yeah, I've already heard all of this. But in Season 3, we see that Eren and Hange spent a ton of time together trying to understand and master his transformations. So now, Hange just has to understand whether any of it was genuine. I think this encroaching doubt and mistrust is just a super realistic take on this kind of sudden heel turn from what was once their single closest ally. Much like last time, this episode is also cyclical, so we'll keep returning to the scene. As for the title of the episode, A Sound Argument, I mean, do you even need me to overanalyze this? Obviously, this one refers to Connie's 100% correct and sound argument that Sasha did indeed contradict herself.
We can't entrust it to someone who's slow like you.
Huh? You're more of an idiot than me, which means you just contradicted yourself.
Okay, goofs aside, it's a line explicitly mentioned by the MPs regarding Historia giving birth, but really, it is an overarching theme for just about every plan in this episode. We are in full-blown politics territory, so the source of drama and friction throughout this entire arc is all individual actors working to better their own position. Problem is, everyone working in self-interest creates a lot of contradicting plans. Just about anyone can make a sound argument for their side, but that doesn't necessarily create any kind of solution. And this would also be very neatly contrasted with the episode's savagery, as in all the talks fell through and now we descend to the primal savagery that is humanity. More on that soon TM though. Moving into the episode, we are back in flashback land, with LEMMiNO meeting up with Eren and the other scouts. But we also see that, even a year after their initial arrival, Eren was still locked away and under the watch of Levi, which, to be fair, does make a lot of sense considering dealing with the Beast Titan was kind of a dicey prospect. But LEMMiNO is still very cheery, saying the port is complete and they are welcoming their first visitor. The quote-unquote soul-friendly nation to Paradis, Hizuru and their special envoy, Azumabito. This episode is non-linear, and we have the benefits of the Founding Titan, so let's talk about this non-linearly. This quote-unquote soul-friendly nation thing is not true in more ways than one. First off, while Azumabito might preach about their historical bond, their loyalty, and this offer of unconditional support, it's not really any of that. She might believe that on a strictly personal level, but as a diplomat, it's all just shallow platitudes. Something we've seen that she is very good at already. This entire proposition is based solely on the Iceburst Stone. That's it. When Paradis raises the idea of using Hizuru as a gateway to the rest of the world, they immediately refuse because they want a monopoly on Paradis' natural resources. It might not be military subjugation as it is with Marley, but it is still a form of economic colonialism. They'd ship on over their state-of-the-art military and basically turn Paradis into a small resource colony. And the thing is, while all of that sounds very, very bad because, you know, colonialism, in Paradis' situation, it's really not that bad of a deal. If you remember the whole soon bombs will rain from the sky and we'll be powerless to watch thing with Marley, the first ever plane was powered by Iceburst Stone and it was made in Hizuru. If Paradis were to agree to this deal, yes, they would largely be exploited just for their resources. But in doing that, they would become absolutely indispensable for Hizuru. They would have every incentive to develop Paradis into an absolute stronghold. And so the question arises of, if you are a leader of people and you have this opportunity that will cost a lot, but it will keep your people safe, wouldn't it be your responsibility to take the deal as is? Before we answer that question, that very neatly leads us to number 2. If even Hizuru, a nation that has rich history with Paradis, is an ally only because it is profitable, what does that mean for the rest of the world that we know already took advantage of Paradis' defeat of the warriors? It sounds awfully similar to tangentially working with Paradis because it was profitable. It sounds very grim when we talk about the world just hating Paradis and all Eldians. But one thing this arc makes very, very clear is that on the world stage, the hatred of Paradis and the support of Paradis was almost entirely out of convenience. In the modern day, continuing the narrative that all Eldians are just devils was just profitable. You could force them into these small internment zones, give them scraps for food, and continue to exploit what is effectively cheap labor. And better yet for nations like Marley, they even have a big boogeyman that they can scapegoat so that the rest of the population keeps looking at them instead of looking up at the real problem of a militaristic country attacking everyone, which probably a bigger problem. That was the entire point of Willie's plan. He knew that Marley had overextended itself and it was starting to splinter from within. The anti-Marleyan forces who are now literally helping Paradis, all the nations who immediately took advantage of Paradis' victory, Azumabito, and even Zeke all show just how close to falling apart it already was. And so, Willie concocted the new fantasy that Eren unfortunately validated literally instantly. But backing up to where we are now in the flashback, the question arises of, how far would this supposed hatred actually go if Parody shows up with ODM gear on a silver platter and says, listen, Marley's Titan airdrops? Yeah, we know how to handle them, and we also have a literal magical ore that we are ready to trade. Make a public offering for an unconditional bilateral peace deal with Marley. Marley is obviously going to deny it because they don't want to end this war. Just let the world see that and then use the leverage they clearly already have. At this point in time, Parody doesn't need sympathy or apologies or reparations or anything. They just need the manpower and weaponry to force Marley into a peace deal. One look at our own real-world history shows very well that nations might not like each other, but what they really hate is, oh, I don't know, a militaristic superpower subjugating all of their adversaries. And think of all the neutral parties seeing this go down. Marley is steamrolling anything and everything. What guarantee is there that they are not next on the chopping block? They have every incentive to back a peace deal. So, super TLDR, Azumabito pushing so incredibly aggressively in these early negotiations just kinda tipped their hand and actually showed how much leverage Parody had. They are not allies, and the world is not the enemy. Everyone is an independent actor working exclusively in self-interest. It is literally as simple as that, and luckily for Parody, they could take advantage of that self-interest. Returning back to where we were though, we see their first meeting and Azumabito reveals that she is in fact an Apple employee. We already talked about this way back in Season 1, but yes, this is where we get the single dumbest plot hole in all of Attack on Titan with Mikasa's tattoo. Condensed lore recap. For some reason, we changed the tattoo to rather be an embroidery pattern that we never even see. Unlike the manga, where Mikasa always has the wrist wrap thingy, the anime doesn't have that either, even as recently as the seaside scene, so it was a continuous decision to change it. But instead of MapUp continuing the change, and maybe having her add the embroidery as a part of the scarf or something like that, they just kinda retconned it back in and act as if nothing at all is wrong. It's very unfortunate the studio change caused this, and to be honest, I have literally no idea why we changed it in the first place, but yeah, this is definitely a lowlight for Attack on Titan, where the usual intrigue and foreshadowing are just entirely artificial. The reveal of the pattern should have been a huge deal for us, but it's just not, because it's entirely artificial. If we ever get like a Attack on Titan remaster or a re-edit or something like that, this is one of those scenes that just needs to be fixed because it is a blatant retcon. Oh yeah, and people also talk about how, what if Mikasa got the tattoo during the time skip, which doesn't really make sense because in this case the time skip would be like 9-12 months, something like that. It's a very odd period to suddenly get the tattoo that your mom warned you about. And number two, Mikasa literally says that she showed it to Eren when they were kids, so she didn't have the tattoo. She has never had it. It's just a retcon. That aside, we also get a few funny lines from the MPs about how everyone's talking about nations while they don't even know what a nation is. But Pixis steps in saying that, in this new world, they are children learning to walk, adding they should just sit quietly and learn. This is pretty much Pixis' MO that we've seen many times. Listen, plan, then make a judgment call, and then go all in. We saw that with the whole Eren debacle and later the Tribunal. We saw a little more of that with him learning of Annie's capture and that supposedly there are even more rats. And more recently, we also saw him work together with Eren to usurp the false king. So yes, pretty much Big Brain Pixis being Big Brain, and when I say Big Brain, I really mean it, because Mappa's version of Pixis does sometimes look a little bit hilarious. Another very messed up thing in this episode are all the juxtapositions we get. We see Historia absolutely beaming. They even give her the squiggly smile as she cheerily talks about how she and Mikasa are now equally important. Earlier in the series, we've seen Mikasa give her a bit of a death stare whenever she got too close to Eren for Mikasa's liking. So I think this is just her being happy that she'd finally be able to break through that icy shell that Mikasa often creates around herself. The two of them don't share many scenes in the earlier seasons, and considering the circumstances in which Parody finds itself, I think this moment of just friendship is really powerful. Like, keep in mind, we are literally dealing with existential questions right now, and the Queen is just very cheery. To be fair though, Historia does have the single greatest Queen's Guard you could ever ask for. Imagine having 2 Ackermans and a dude with 2 Titans, including the Founding Titan, directly tied up in your safety. I mean, I think I'd be beaming too. But most importantly, Historia once again uses her royalty privileges and gives Mikasa a solid whack. So yes, she is now the only character in the entire series to have punched 2 Ackermans and lived to tell the tale. And exactly like Historia, Eren just smiles. There is a spark of hope. How could something this pure, this hopeful, devolve to the vision of the rumbling? As we get to their meeting, Azumabito thanks Zeke for bringing them together, and we descend into, yup, a secondary flashback. They have a super secret meeting where Zeke presents her with a set of ODM gear. And in case you were wondering where he got it from, it doesn't come from Shiganshina, nor was it gifted to him by Parody. This is Mike's ODM gear that we saw him very carefully remove back in the Season 2 premiere. That is what he means by, I procured it myself. Mildly funny and also mildly sad, facts aside, the rest of their conversation mostly revolves around the Iceburst Stone and the ODM gear business that I already yapped about plenty at the start of the video. And to really drive home the fact that this was always just about money, we even get this comically evil scene of Azumabito licking her lips as Mikasa realizes that it was all just a pretext. Again, that's not a totally bad thing. If bloodlines, kings, and queens mean nothing and all the world values is power and wealth, well then, Azumabito crawling to Parody clearly shows they have quite a bit of power and wealth. The original proposal has 3 big points. First, they conduct a test run of a tiny rumbling just to demonstrate how bad it can get. Then, Hizuru's military-industrial complex kicks in and modernizes Parody's military to slowly phase out the need for the rumbling. So far so good, some might even say too good, because number 3, the founding titan, and a titan of royal blood is passed down in perpetuity, or at least Parody and power exists. And this is where things get very, very complicated, because yes, this is a 100% sound plan. While this would paint a massive target on Parody and Hizuru, because, monopolizing a valuable natural resource is sure to end well, but this would, without a shadow of a doubt, guarantee Parody's safety 1,000,000% in the short term, and most likely also in the long term. This plan effectively guarantees mutually assured destruction, and based on our own history, that seems to be the only thing that actually stops conflict. If Hizuru sets up shop and Parody has the rumbling, even if Marley were to somehow miraculously put together a global alliance and whatnot, the attack would still be just too costly to ever be worth it. No matter the price tag that Hizuru would demand on the Iceburst Stone, it would still be cheaper than taking on the stronghold that is Parody and the rumbling. That being said, there is one very, very big but. Telling Parody, a society that has been vilified by the entire world because of something they simply inherited, that they must now push that onto their children, that's a bit of a non-starter. No matter how sound this argument is, hey, I said the title, it's going to be a very, very hard sell for the population. And that's exactly what we see. While Historia plainly says, okay, I'll do it, Eren shoots up saying, after years of getting trampled on, now we've got to breed like livestock? And the music accompanying all of this? Cinema. And also note that Eren is still looking for some other way. He says it's too dangerous to gamble on the rumbling. In large part because it means Historia is going to die in 13 years, but also because he is actively trying to avoid fulfilling the future he saw. This entire plan is the perfect example of why actually finding just peace is so hard. Theoretically, we can do it right now, but to put this burden on future generations, you better be sure that this doesn't happen again. But as we are yanked back into the present, we get another stark reminder of just how dramatically things have changed in between. Hange says, I felt the same kind of urgency, but I still don't get why you went off on your own and put the island in danger. Something we'd see explored again later in this episode. I will spoil it for you. It's about how Sasha is dead. Yes, the punchline is once again just that Sasha is dead. Yes, I know. But Eren cuts Hange off, basically saying, I have the Warhammer and no matter what kind of box you put me in, I will always break out. But much more importantly, he pushes Hange further, grabbing the jacket's collar and screaming that if there's something they know, he better hear it. As he says this, his eyes go green, the Titan markings briefly appearing across his cheeks as lightning zaps into the frame. And oh boy, the amount of contradicting ideas in this scene is insane. This scene is clearly presented as if Eren is off his rocker and being needlessly aggressive, right? Like bro, why threaten Hange and literally start transforming? Don't you think it's like a little bit too much? You wanna maybe chill out a little bit? But then you reframe it. He said point blank, I can escape. No matter what you do, you cannot contain me. So the question you should ask is, then why don't you? This is not a threat. This is effectively admitting that I am staying behind for as long as I can because... why? Because he wants to hear something. And then this sudden burst of rage. What I think triggers it is Hange simply not being able to understand what's currently going on in his brain. All of these conversations about Historia's safety and bygone plans are completely irrelevant to him because nothing ever changed. Not once have any of their actions changed what he saw in the future. Later in this episode, we'd see Hange offer that they go to the other nations themselves, and back then, Eren happily agreed. They all went there, and no matter how much progress they seemed to be making, that is where he met Ramsey. Nothing ever changed regardless of what they pursued. So when Eren asks, if there's something you know, let's hear it, that is exactly what he is asking. It is a plea for help. A plea for liberating him from this prison that he has put himself into. He just said he can break out at any moment. Just like he thought that the rumbling would be freedom, when it never was. This episode, much like the conversation with Ramsey, is all about showing the paradox going on in Eren's brain. On one hand, he says that the rumbling is too risky of a gamble and that they should pursue other means. He is so tired of it all that his body begins to revolt as he begs for some other way, but at the same time, Liberio already happened, and for him, so has the rumbling. All of this is a mixture of him just wanting to move forward to see that vision that he so desperately craved, but also just begging for someone to just stop him. And so, with absolutely nothing achieved and no real way forward, Hange just sits alone saying, Erwin only made one mistake in his life, picking me as the commander. Big sad. And what's just as sad is the immediate smash cut to Historia's exhausted face. When you contrast that to her beaming self just a few minutes ago, it is just misery. We then cut on over to the Midcard detailing Hizuru. Most of it is just recap to what we already heard with Mikasa. But what's very interesting here is the additional note about them having the most advanced weaponry in the world and, wink wink, aircraft, wink wink. That again just goes back to those fears of air superiority we already heard with Marley's top brass. So for like the 24th time in this video, this was a pretty bitter, but still a way out for parody. Returning to the episode, we very inconspicuously focus on the wine as we see MPs drunkenly chatting. They talk about how they should have stuck with the original plan and then basically just diss Historia a bunch. Niall is a gigachad, so he shuts them up and says that she is free to choose her own partner. He explains they lived in the same area as kids and that he used to bully her a bunch to try to get her attention, saying he eventually started working at the orphanage out of guilt. Finally adding that Historia was the first one to approach him. This is easily one of the, controversial, theorized things, I guess, in Season 4, as many people think that the Farmlad is just very, very random, while others speculate further that the father of our child is actually Eren. I very much disagree with both of these statements for a multitude of reasons. First off, there's Historia's role as the queen, and just how much of her story is challenging those expectations of royalty. We already know that soon after ascending the throne, she started the orphanage and spent a ton of time there. It was her way of making sure that no kid would ever suffer the lonely, miserable childhood that she had. Just like her constantly wanting to fight alongside the scouts, her being royalty was completely irrelevant. It was largely rebelling against the crown and those previous expectations of royalty. So her approaching the Farmlad, someone who is so insignificant in the world that Isayama didn't even show us his face, is her way of rebelling against her duty as the queen. She refused some arranged marriage. She never allowed her to become a pawn in someone else's grand plan ever again. And so, she approached the most simple but honest man she knew. Someone who spent years simply trying to make up for something as small as childish bullying. He never tried apologizing, he never offhandedly mentioned that they knew each other, he never approached any of her friends. Nothing. He just went to the orphanage, not the palace, and simply started working. We have talked so much about how Attack on Titan explicitly challenges the viewer with a bunch of these things, be it throwing us in the shoes of Eren when Reiner is transforming, or having Gross talk directly to us as the audience moments before we are going to cheer at violence, so with this, it's just once again more of the same. The Farmlad is a completely random, faceless, nameless, and really identityless dude by design. It's just a natural bookend to Historia's story that was all about challenging these perceptions of royalty and what status even is. And in the long run, that also becomes a message for how little people actually need to live a happy life, but we'll get to that later. But secondly, it's also a checkmate for the MPs, while also potentially delaying the rumbling for Eren. The MPs even talk about this. Using a pregnant woman for any kind of Titan would be, well, no one really knows what it would be, and that's the problem. Risking the only royal blood on the island is definitely one of the ideas of all time. And for the whole Eren father thing, well, that goes completely against both Eren's and Historia's stories. Eren is all about individual freedoms. It's why he doesn't stop the Alliance from attacking him, it's why he connects with Historia in the first place since both of them have inherited their father's guilt, and it's why he is the one to ultimately free Ymir. Having a child with Historia who would directly inherit all of that baggage is, well, that is exactly what his father burdened him with, and that makes no sense. There's a bunch of duality with the rumbling happening and Eren dying and the child being born, which people think is like a implication that they're in some way connected, but I think it's more so to draw a contrast, but we'll leave that for when we get there. And with Historia, I think it goes against her character for largely the same reasons, except in regard to the crown. Her entire story has been breaking free of the chains that is royalty. The MPs even say that she is a queen in name only. Having a child with someone, again, that we don't even know the name of, is the ultimate example of her undoing those expectations. And that's not even to mention the whole, like, what, she's gonna have a child with Eren, and then he's going to go and die, and then the child will be fatherless, which is, like, the same exact trauma that she went through? Like, that just doesn't make any sense from a character point of view to me. At first, I thought this was just a weird, like, shipping thing that people do, but people keep saying it, so I think it's actually become, like, a legit theory. I don't even know. But yes, I think the Farmlad does exactly what he's supposed to do, and I have no complaints. The last thing we see here is one of the servers going for another bottle of wine, only for Nicolo to recommend a specific bottle. Once again, I am the interstellar meme, because no, please stop. Going back to better days, we see their squad working on the train tracks, with Jean molding over Eren's genius idea of building muscle while also getting work done. Because these are the better times, we get some quality goofs, such as Mikasa casually carrying 4 pieces of lumber alone, because, you know, Giga Chad. Armin chasing around Sasha while screaming that she's spilling all of their water is also gold, especially because we don't really have a lot of Armin Sasha scenes in the series. And what's even better is Mikasa casually waltzing back into the frame with 4 pieces of metal. 10 out of 10, cinema. But wait, there is more. As Hange and Levi arrive, the short man is also molding that they've all grown super tall. But the dub just takes that to 11, and I love it.
You brats got taller. It's like you're sprouting up just to spite me.
I must once again disclose the fact that I am the same height as Levi. You can clown on us all you want, I don't have back and knee pain. Elbozo skill issue. Hange explains the whole thing about Hizuru refusing to help because they want a monopoly, but I already yapped about all this earlier. The only thing I want to add here is the Eren angle, because this is very much the source of that disappointment he tells Ramsey about. Humanity existing beyond the walls might have been okay-ish, but humanity that is just as corrupt and selfish as the evil we've already seen within the walls, well, that very much shatters their dream of a lush, empty land that they could explore together. They escaped the walls and found out that they escaped nothing, it's just more of the same. That corruption, it exists everywhere. And the thing is, paradoxically, it also shows that Eren's rumbling plan was a stupid plan to begin with, because people are always the same, and he knows it. It never mattered whether it's inside the walls or out, whether they're Eldian or Marleyan. They will always exploit each other. If all that remained of the world was just Paradis, well, we literally saw the same thing already happen within just the isolated population of Paradis. To quote Pixis and Erwin, fighting will only stop once there is just one person left. But Armin is just plain confused, asking, why don't they even consider the path of peace? But Mikasa cuts back saying, I think they don't know. They fear us because they don't know what we are. This is 100% true and is just that better the devil you know type of mentality. But again, if they were to bait Marley into these peace talks that they deny, that would be a very good icebreaker. And so realizing that, they could just go and meet people themselves, Hange says just that, we are scouts, let's just sail over there. Unfortunately for our main Tatakae man, this would turn out to be the worst case scenario. But ignoring the timey-wimey shenanigans, this is a very great plan. As we cut to the setting sun, Eren talks about how his time is running out and who would get the Titan. We go through all the goofs and gaffes of Jean being too brilliant of a specimen to die in 13 years, Sasha saying Connie is an idiot and can inherit the Titan, then Connie saying that Sasha just contradicted herself because she's an even bigger idiot, and generally, Isayama is just burying that knife deeper into our hearts. We know full well that all of this really meant nothing. He dragged them into war, and Sasha is already dead. This whiplash between the constantly on edge and explosive Eren and this one, it's certainly something. And then all of them becoming quiet and blushing, I mean, it's just diabolical. That being said, this is also exactly why I think a couple more of Eren's most important people should have died in the rumbling. We'll leave that for when we actually get there, but this is the kind of whiplash that I think we should have been dealing with in the Battle of Heaven and Earth. But okay, let's not get into that now. Just like we had that cut to the exhausted Historia, we cut to Mikasa watching the sunset, most likely reminiscing about that exact evening, wondering how did it turn out this way. Jean briefly talks about the whole Pixis Yelena thing, saying it's a strong-arm tactic but that it makes sense. Zeke is still an enigma, and building plans with him is kinda dicey, not to mention Eren's sudden heel turn. Really, they have literally no idea what's going on, so it is better just to restrict all of these explosive players and kinda just figure out what they even want. And he also very explicitly notes whatever the two of them talked about is something only they know. I think that pretty clearly indicates that whatever it is they're cooking up is entirely different to the original 3-point plan that we discussed with Azumabito. And following that strategy talk, we just get this super raw scene between the now splintered and fragile squad. Connie just asks, "Did that look like Eren to you guys?" saying he doesn't think it was. We've already heard very similar wording used in reference to Yuri inheriting the Founding Titan, as in people changed when they inherited their memories. With Eren, it's of course not as binary since he only got blasted by memories a couple of times throughout the series, but somewhere along the way, he clearly did get lost in that mind-numbing soup of past, present, and future. Personally, I think that breaking point was always meeting Ramsey, because that was really the point where he confirmed that everything he has seen is turning out exactly as he did see. It also works out timing-wise, as in, we see Eren can still be cheery even after seeing Historia's memories, but at some point he becomes like super cold. And again, I think that happens after he met Ramsey. Mikasa purely instinctively cuts back asking, "And what if he's not?" To which Connie responds with an equally cold, "We need to be ready to cut him down." Mikasa obviously lashes out, but the cognitive dissonance in the scene is just wild. To have this episode where Historia is happy about how close they've all grown, to have Eren show a vulnerable side of him that we have never seen, and to explicitly say that they are important to him, only for all of that talk to now be challenged with the reality of the situation, is just confusing above all else. There's a good reason why so many characters just keep stressing that simple question of why. No one can even begin to guess how all of this fell apart so incredibly quickly. But Jean also adds that something is wrong, saying no matter how strong Mikasa is, Eren would never drag her into a fight. But he did, and he sent Armin to destroy the ports. He used all of them. Every single person who was quote-unquote important to him, he turned into a pawn. Is just another beautiful encapsulation of the paradox that is Eren. And what underscores all of that beautifully is Mikasa trying to argue that maybe he just needed them, only for Connie to bluntly say, and Sasha wouldn't have died. If most of Liberio was asking this very big picture question of how far are we ready to excuse the Scouts' actions, then this episode is all about asking whether we will excuse betrayal on a very, very personal level. And we all know what Eren thinks about betrayal. But a bit of a mic drop moment comes from Armin, with him first saying that we should talk to him, which is exactly what you'd expect, just like we saw him talking to Annie in the prior episode. But he then adds, now that we have the serum, there are other options. We can have someone inherit Eren's Titans. And you know how people talk about what would have happened if Eren survived? Yeah, I think there would be a lot less talking and a lot more eliminating the unpredictable and crazy variable that puts his own allies in danger. This is of course ignoring the fixed timeline stuff because like the rumbling would have already happened and there's nothing you could do about it, right? But just saying, I think if Eren were alive, this wouldn't be a discussion. Pretty sure if Eren did this and they got back to the island, Eren would be dinner probably the same evening. Goofs aside, if Armin of all people is considering a permanent solution regarding Eren, that is definitely a sign that things are way beyond salvageable. Granted, he is also working with directly clashing ideas of what Eren even is, and both are actually correct. He does suspect that everything he is doing to distance himself is just a mask he puts up, and that he is still their ally. Even when the rumbling starts, Armin's conclusion is that Eren is still with them, which he was. He was playing Zeke the entire time, and is still on, quote-unquote, the side of parody. But at the same time, he also clearly sees that Eren is dangerous and unpredictable. He might have pulled some insane things before, but now, people are dying. Their goals of protecting the island might align, but having their single most important assets just randomly go off on his own is just not something they can deal with. It's just an excellent scene that is further elevated by all the directly contradicting flashbacks we see all throughout the episode. And what's also very beautiful direction is this little sequence right at the end. We see a full moon, something that's long been associated with moments of transformation, mystery, and general spookiness. And that then directly cuts to a close-up of pouring wine and then Zeke. So, in other words, spooky full moon, Armin literally just mentioned the Titan syrup, and we see lots and lots and lots of wine with some creepy undertones of specific recommendations, and then Zeke, or, you know, the dude who can transform people with Titan serum. This is diabolical foreshadowing, and I love it. And with that, that is episode 69. Yes, if you were listening extra closely, you might have just heard me say Titan syrup. No, I did not intend to do it, but no, I'm also not taking it out. And you know what? From now on, I'll just keep calling it Titan syrup. It sounds very cursed, but you know what? It sounds kind of funny. And speaking of Titan syrup, here's another bonus fact. You know how we talked about Mike's ODM gear and all the wine stuff? Yeah, so if Mike was still alive, this wouldn't have worked. He would have smelled that the wine was different. So when they talked about him being humanity's strongest soldier after Levi, they weren't kidding. Like, Zeke killing Mike inadvertently enabled this to happen. It's crazy. All that being said, that is enough yapping for this time, because next time we'll be picking up with our 2 new visitors. So I hope to see you back as we continue overanalyzing Attack on Titan. And that's the video. Update on the usual Korotos cinematic universe. We're finally getting close to the end of Dark Souls 2, so I think we'll be moving on to Dark Souls 3, and of course Elden Ring Night Reign is coming out very soon, so I'm also going to be streaming that. And also, there's a bunch of murmurings about something to do with Attack on Titan. There was like talk of new movies and stuff like that. Whenever this stuff comes out, I usually talk about it on live streams, and usually there's a video version on the second channel. Sometimes if it's something super small, I don't put it up, but yeah, if you want to hear my thoughts, all that happens on the second channel. All that being said, I want to say a massive thank you to our current patrons and YouTube members who allow me to produce even more of these for you all. And let's also give a warm welcome to the newest members of the team, Jonas, Wallin, I think, Nova, and Complete Clownery. Without you, there'd be a whole lot less of my rambling, so seriously, thank you, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching, I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!